like really good and professional. It's great.
Since I grew my hair out in COVID.
Yeah. Oh, that's all COVID? That was fast.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I guess we're going to the third year, but
it's the first time I've been told I look like an artist. So.
Oh.
I'll take it. I've also been told I look like John Wick, and
John Wick.
That makes me feel tough.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I'll just introduce it, and then we can get into
Sounds good.
all of it.
Awesome.
Wherever you want to take us, and whatever you want to talk about.
Great.
Anything you have coming up, anything you've done in the past, philosophy, frustrations.
There's a lot of those.
Beef you have with any other artist. You want to call them out?
Thank you for giving me a platform for calling people out.
For all your beefs.
Exactly.
Okay. I am Ryan Brown, and this is the Unvarnished podcast. And I'm in New York, in Bushwick, Brooklyn, with Hyeseung Song.
Yeah.
And we met, I believe, at the Hudson River Fellowship. Were you there in 2007 or 2008?
I was there for both.
Both. Okay.
Yeah.
So was I.
Oh, okay, great. I remember you really vividly, actually.
Yeah.
Because I think I was leaving, and you had like sort of started hanging out with like, with Nancy Fletcher and Travis Seymour. And so you guys, I felt like the three of you guys were a posse, and I had like my posse. But then there was one day where you needed a ride to where you were working. You were working on something that was like so much underbrush and just lots and lots of leaves. And to me, I was like, oh, leaves, so many leaves. But you were like in love with each leaf and like finding each leaf and discovering what was going on and like the poetry of the underbrush. And I was like, so I think I gave you a ride to this location, or maybe I picked you up and took you back. But that was one of my like vivid memories of you during the Hudson River Fellowship. Yeah,
that was, it was such a, I look at that as one of my major pivotal like life experiences because both years, right? I mean, there were the people that were there. I like to list them off because to think I was among them is always inspiring to me to have these memories of, all of us kind of coming out of school and, kind of being bright-eyed and not knowing necessarily where life's going to take us or, what our next work is going to be, and just diving into the landscape and studying it. Especially that first year, none of us really knew what to do. I don't know if you remember, but kind of like those first couple of days were like, oh yeah, I don't know, what does Jacob want? Does he want us to draw?
Exactly. And I feel like it's because the fellowship was in its gestational period. It was very new. I think we were the inaugural cohort, weren't we?
Yep.
And so the fact was, we were like, is this a workshop? Are we supposed to be pleasing people? What are we supposed to be doing? And then really trying to take cues from each other. But kind of, I think the energy was, the first couple of days was nervous
and kind of lost, and people like, are there expectations? Are there things we're supposed to be doing? All we knew was like, well, I think we're supposed to draw for the first couple of days. I don't think we're supposed to paint. But what was amazing to me was you had this group of artists who all had, pretty solid foundation from academic study, and maybe not necessarily a ton of professional experience in terms of making, tons of their own work or years and years of maturing into their own work.
Right.
And so it went so quickly from that sort of floundering, questioning, unsure quality that I felt was kind of the whole group, to maybe the second or third night we started lining up our drawings in the barn.
Yeah.
And it was like everybody's eyes got big, and they're like, oh, look what that person's doing, and look what Colleen's doing,
Yep.
and look what Will's doing,
Yep.
look what Jacob did,
Yep.
and Ted, and then all of a sudden, everybody got better. It was like
Yeah.
I totally see what he's doing, and I love it. I see what they're doing, they love it, and I love it. I'm gonna go do that. And then by like day 5, there was just an explosion of brilliant sketches coming out of everyone.
Right. And I think it was also that not only were we like sort of baby artists or like emerging artists, but we were also, we were mostly figurative painters.
Yeah.
Like most of us had learned and trained our eye and developed our eye vis-a-vis the figure, and to push that and pivot and look and now at a different subject with that same kind of with the same kind of modalities and with the same kind of like pedagogy that we had experienced, that we didn't know what we were doing at first.
Yeah.
And then it was like, well, everybody here is there's like a lot of sheer talent and
Right.
and a lot of ambition.
Yeah.
And so it was this kind of incubator for a lot of amazing work. And then I know a lot of people coming out of that who graduated into really becoming serious, I think, landscape painters.
Yeah. And the second year, like Thomas Kegler came, and
Who was like, who was like totally not from the New York
right.
atelier scene, and he just busted out
Yeah.
all of these paintings. He would make like 7 cloud paintings a day,
Right.
and then turn around and make 7 cloud paintings the next morning. It was just the sheer prolific nature of Thomas was amazing.
Yeah. He folded right into the mix.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, taking all of the academic nude and the cast and the still life and whatever, and now saying, how do I study this new thing that you're going from a cast which feels very controlled,
Right.
Or an academic nude which you
Right.
become very familiar with and comfortable with, how to break that subject down and start to define it in paint, to like, what the hell do I do with these thousands of leaves? How do I simplify?
That
How do I
underbrush,
study this?
seriously, absolutely.
But again, I think having that group and seeing, Colleen was doing some really cool ink drawings. I think Ted was doing some amazing water sketches. Jacob was doing some really cool scenes. But in a lot of cases, you'd go out for 12 hours a day, be dropped off, and you're kind of alone.
Right.
But a lot of times you're painting with 4 or 5 people, and you
Right.
can take
Your
a break,
posse.
have some Doritos,
Right.
throw some rocks,
Yeah.
whatever.
Or go swim. There were a lot of times we would just like jump in.
Yeah.
And get cooled off, or a bunch of people would, like, tourists would show up and they would be in the scene, and all of a sudden, like, what are you supposed to do? Well, I guess I'll just join them, jump in.
Yeah.
It was, I think that to me the lovely part of that experience was learning that nature is not always controlled, like you say,
Yeah.
that there's a stochastic nature to it, that you have to, like, you put a figure in there and then all of a sudden you have to deal with like changing light source and
Right.
the dappled nature of the light on this part of the, and what the leaves are doing, and how things are translucent versus opaque, and that kind of thing you don't see in a heightened way when you're painting in the studio.
Yeah. But also just the collaborative nature of the learning was explosive.
Totally.
You could immediately see the decisions that other people were doing,
Yeah.
and then go try them out the next day.
Right.
And everybody was doing that with everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, again, from kind of like scared confusion on day 1, day 2, to just this monstrous energy and explosion of ability and interpretation of the landscape. And then the second year, I was able to set up a show for the following summer,
Mm-hmm.
at the Springville Museum of Art. And we had some great, like Shane Wolf participated, Arancha Martinez. Who is she dating? Mikhail Olazabal,
yeah.
Colleen, I believe, can't remember if Will had any work in there, but it was, phenomenal.
Yeah.
Exhibition. We showed our sketches. We showed bigger paintings that we did from the sketches. And amazing experience. I'd love to do it again. We're actually kind of planning a 1-week thing in Zion coming up.
That's incredible.
Yeah, one of my students, her parents have 2 homes that look right out over the river into Zion's, and so we're going to take a week and do something a little bit similar.
That sounds awesome. I think that's so fun when you can see, I don't know, I mean, I'm coming at it from being an artist, but like if I were a collector and I could see like all the steps leading up to this one painting, that it's not just this painting, but like here are the studies, they're so observational, they're so perspectival, and then all of a sudden, you see the imprint of those studies in the actual final painting, but there's a license, the artistic license that is taken by the artist to change and manipulate and interpret. That must be so fun to see as a collector.
Yeah, to subdue and decide, what to focus on and how to compose it, and the landscape, along with the figure. I mean, all subject matters are infinite, but to have a group of painters like that and the energy they all bring, the excitement and the ambition, like you said, is a special moment. Like you can plan it, but how it comes together is you don't have as much control over. So that was really special. So that's how we met, and then we've just kind of stayed in touch through social media and whatever. Unfortunately, like our paths don't cross that often, but we got to catch up a little bit at the Salmagundi exhibition last week, at which I believe you stepped in and judged, right?
Yes, I judged it with Max Ginsberg, and then we had a panel discussion after the judging, and then I saw you at the award show, the reception, so that was really fun. I felt like that was the most artists I had seen in one room in a long time.
Yeah.
It was a good time. I just feel like it's been COVID is very sad. I think in your episode with Katie Lydiard, you had said how we self-quarantine anyways as artists, but then once in a while we do come out and see each other, and that's so special. And so it felt the Salmagundi Club did a good job bringing us together.
I was happy to be able to come out. I for years have been thinking I'll see into Salmagundi exhibition, and I'll be like, God damn it, I totally planned on entering that, and I don't remember until I see the show coming out. It's too late. And so finally, after probably 5 years of thinking that, I was able to get something together in time. But so could you tell us a little bit about just your history, kind of give us a picture of where you came from, how you ended up in New York, your artistic journey, as deep as you want to go into that, and then we'll see what you're doing now.
I am a first generation, which means I was born in Korea, first generation Korean American. I grew up in Texas. I was the oldest in my family. My parents had a lot of formal education, but not a lot of money when I was very young. I like to, like your daughter, I like to read a lot, and I drew a lot when I was a kid. My mom, she was my first art teacher, I think, and she was very creative herself, but I think also in Korean educational culture, everybody really learns how to be a well-rounded citizen, public speak, draw, write, do all these things, and so everybody gets like a kind of small smattering of like what is important to the culture. And so my mom was like a very good draftsperson, and so she taught me a little bit about drawing when I was really young. I grew up in Houston, in this area called the Energy Corridor, which is basically this is a little bit later, like in my middle school and high school years. My father he was a serial entrepreneur, and he ended up going to going back to the corporate world, and they started making a little bit more money, so we ended up moving to this place called the Energy Corridor, which is where basically everybody who lives in the energy corridor lives and is off of the oil teat or an allied and adjacent industry. So it's basically like really funneled into the oil industry. And so I didn't really know any artists during the time that I was growing up. But during this time when I was like in middle school and high school, it was very sort of important to me to be very focused in on school. And I was my identity as a person was very much to be a good student. And I think that sounds really lame, but it was really a kind of answer to a more complicated identity that I wasn't really sure I knew how to explore, which was basically like my Korean American identity. So it was like a very socially acceptable way of being like good at society was to be good at school. In high school, I ended up going to this high school where the academically inclined students either like if they were artistic, they went and did music. They did not do visual arts. Unfortunately, the visual arts students were like we all called them like the drug addict skater kids.
I think that's the way it was in my high school too. It was kind of like the dumb class.
Yeah.
Where you saved a lot of those classes for later, like maybe your junior, senior year, so you could have easy schedules. And sorry, I think this sound is maybe a little loud. Let me just check this real quick.
Sure.
I just hear the slightest buzzing, and I don't want this to be. I want to make sure I make myself as little annoying as possible. It was definitely like the class you were taking because you wanted an easy schedule.
Totally.
And then the teachers made it easy. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
There wasn't a whole lot of teaching.
I mean, that's just so
oversight.
Unfortunate, though, because I do know. I mean, I know people who teach high school art who are like just totally phenomenal, but that just wasn't the common thing, and it wasn't in my school either. So when I was growing up, I saw a lot of great art. Like I already knew about a lot of great art, like sort of from the art historic perspective, because.
And where did that come from?
I think I just always really liked like classical. Like I loved classical music. I loved the opera. I really loved. Like classical literature. Like my favorite book when I was growing up was Anna Karenina. Like it just wasn't normal, but that's the stuff that I tended to like. And Houston.
How did you find it? I mean, was it in the house? Did your parents kind of like introduce you, or did you just like on your own just
my mom
get into all of this stuff?
My mom was a great catalyst. She was very she was a very special, creative, and educated woman. She never had a lot of money, but she went to like the best boarding schools in in Korea. Went to the premier, college in Korea, and she like whenever there was a birthday, she would always get me like Anne of Green Gables or War and Peace, and like just books that like I read when I was maybe 12 and couldn't understand, but then when I was 15 or 16, I reread them and revisited them and got a better sense of what they were talking about. And like you read these books, you read the Russians, they're always talking about artists. They're always talking about artists and like what artists are doing and what like painters are capturing when they're and so those conversations I felt very at home in like in engaging in from a very early age, and my mom was good at that too. When I was in college, I came up here to the East Coast. I went to Princeton, and I studied philosophy in college, and did a lot of writing. I didn't have a sense of wanting to be an artist yet because it was something that I left behind when I was a kid. I really wanted to be an artist, but I kind of left that behind because there was so much freaking pressure from my parents, from society. Also, I felt like there was no every achievement closed doors. You know, like when achievements are supposed to open doors, like create opportunities, create options for you. But for me, every time I got something or won something or what, it was like, that's one step further away from being a painter or being an artist or living an artistic life. And that was really sad.
So you had kind of this a deeper feeling of or draw to being an artist.
Yeah.
But you were squashing it incrementally.
Incrementally.
And you felt that.
Yeah, I felt like the world is a wilderness, and the map is yourself. And I didn't know what that map was. And it's really your identity, and you know, like all these doors that I felt were slamming behind me, like I didn't think about how so many of those doors could be opened again, and maybe things were not right at the time. Everything happened fine. You know, I ended up going to Harvard Law School. I ended up going to Harvard Graduate School in philosophy. I didn't finish either of those. I had basically what was a mental breakdown when I was at Harvard, and when I left, I took a year and I started painting on my own, and then I'm
sorry.
That's all right.
My daughter is wandering the streets of
Bushwick.
Hi. Well, I'm recording, so no. Oh, crap.
What?
She can't stay in there unless she has her Vax card
Oh,
and her ID,
no.
which I have.
Oh, no. Does she want to come back up here?
I'm going to run it down to you. What? You want to just sit in the hallway? Sure. Okay, wait. I'm going to pause this real quick.
Yeah.
And go let her.
Got it?
There we go.
Okay.
Where were we? You went to Princeton, Harvard, mental breakdown.
I need a shirt that says that. Nobody would be surprised. Princeton, Harvard, mental breakdown sounds totally logical. It's QED. During that time, I spent a year after I left graduate school and law school, and just did a lot of painting and drawing. I felt like I needed to go off script and do what I wanted to do. And I was living in Princeton at the time because my then boyfriend, who became my husband, now ex-husband, he was very supportive of me doing whatever I needed to do to feel like not trapped in my own life. Like it's funny because I think about it all the time. Like your life is just like a blank canvas. You should do whatever you want with it. And I was really living under a paradigm of shoulds and oughts and must.
Yeah.
It's very exhausting.
Yeah, I've noticed that. There's so many ways that stuff like that can manifest itself, from familial expectations to maybe gender expectations to, for me, I grew up Mormon, so there were a lot of religious expectations that came along with, certain things that you did at certain ages. I spent 2 years on an LDS mission. I think going to the academy it kind of came with some built-in expectations about what art was.
Absolutely.
And now I still find I'm trying to break out of these preconceptions that I didn't even know I had. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
absolutely.
I have so many of those in my history that I could point to and say, like, I didn't know I had that until this happened, and then I was able to shed that. And it's just a series of preconceptions that just continue to crumble. And I feel in a way like I'm I'm growing and expanding, and those shells just shed off.
Yeah.
And I feel like that artistically now. I was able to just go in October to Paris and film some things with Shane Wolf, who's brilliant, and Travis Schlott, Kate Lehman, a Parisian artist named Sébastien Jupil. And it was incredibly expanding for me. And that trip, for the first time in a long time, I came home and I felt a little different about how I was thinking and what the things I wanted to do, what I wanted to, not necessarily what I wanted to say, but how I wanted to say it.
Sure.
And yeah, I mean, it sounds like maybe that year you were able to kind of find some freedom.
I did find some freedom. I think also because I felt like I had almost died. Because I was like, you can either just die or you can do what you want to do in life. There's no really middle ground. And so if the alternative is to die, you need to do what you want to do. And during this time, I was taking a lot of like sort of community art classes, like little art classes with a bunch of people who were like way older than I was, and I painted a lot on my own. And then, there was this point where I was like, what I need to get is like a master's degree in art, an MFA. And I went to Parsons and I went to SVA, and they saw my my portfolio, which I brought, which was not digital during that time. It was like printed out, like I had photographs of my work and that I brought to them. And they said, well, these are really good, but you don't really have a BFA, so you have to do a bachelor's. So
gotta go through those hoops.
Gotta go through those hoops. So I said, well, So
you're, I guess, with the bachelor's from Princeton, all of your experience at Harvard, they're like, well, this is a completely different track.
Totally different track.
You got to start over.
You got to start over. And then I said, well, I'm still paying off my student loans from Princeton. I have $30,000 student loans, and I took out more. And then they were like, well, you just need to double check, because I think the killer was that for unsubsidized federal student loans for undergraduate, there's a cap for lifetime, lifetime cap. So that was like a really wonderful thing to learn, because that basically meant that any expensive place that I could take out more student loans for, I couldn't afford. Because I was already going to be close to the lifetime cap. So I met this man. He was only a couple of years older than I was, and he had studied at LAC Atelier.
Okay.
And he was teaching at this small little community place and in Princeton, and he was teaching like the secrets of the masters, techniques of the masters. Yeah. And he showed me that he had done this painting with 4 colors, and I was totally blown away. He used the Zorn palette, obviously. Sure. And I was totally blown away, and he was like, I studied at this place called an atelier. And I said, what is that? Then he put me onto ARC, ARC Renewal.
What was his name?
His name was... I don't remember.
Okay.
I think it's John something.
Okay.
Yeah, he runs a small atelier in like Bucks County, PA. I forgot John Murdoch. Is his name. Yeah, very nice person. And we didn't stay in touch, obviously, because I couldn't remember his name. But I looked at the Art Renewal website, and it was in its early period of being a website, and it was listing all of the approved masters.
Right. What year was this?
This was roughly 2004, 2005. Okay.
That's right about when I
totally,
was like 2002,
right? I think
2003.
I think you and I were like around the same time, like kind of coming into this. And I looked at all of the approved masters, and I was like, well, Jacob Collins' work is the best. Yeah. I mean, I thought. Yeah. My opinion.
At that time, there weren't that many. I mean,
right.
the like you said, Art Renewal was kind of itself in its infancy.
It was in its infancy. I don't even know if they called them ARC approved masters at the time, but I do remember seeing Jacob's work, and I was like, well, this is where I need to go.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the thing that drew me to Jacob was not like his technique, it was his aesthetic.
Okay.
I think his sensibility was so beautiful and profound and tasteful.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know if I felt like a lot of the masters that I had seen, their subject matter, what they were trying to say, how they were saying, didn't appeal to me. So I thought, it's like, if Jacob doesn't take me, I'm not doing this. That's just what it was.
Yeah.
And that's probably in keeping with like everything I had done before. It's like, if I don't go to what I think is the best place, I'm not doing it.
Right.
But that's how it happened. And I walked in, and Jacob took me. I came the next day. I had just gotten married like 5 days before. It felt like a new phase of my life, a phase that was that I could wholeheartedly endorse, a phase that felt like I was fulfilling myself for the first time, and it felt really good.
And at that point, it was Water Street still.
Yeah.
And were you able to stay in Princeton and commute?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, Princeton's very close to New York, and a lot of people do commute. I did commute the first year. I didn't have my husband at the time. He was a student at Princeton, and so he was like on a stipend, like a graduate student stipend, and my parents were not going to help us financially, and so it was a really hard existence the first year, because I would go home and I was exhausted. I had never been that intellectually exhausted in my life, not through like Harvard graduate school ever. It was like, it was 8.5 hours, 9 hours a day of painting or drawing, and just looking into the cast and like seeing things that really aren't there because you're just looking at them for too long, and then getting on the train and coming back, and I was just so zonked. But then I worked most evenings and weekends to make sure that I could go to the atelier. The second and third year, I left in 3 years. And that's another story in and of itself. But I ended up leaving after my third year. But for the last 2 years, the second and third year, we lived in New York in Hell's Kitchen, which is called Hell's Kitchen. It's the West Side, very close to Penn Station, so that my ex-husband could go back and forth from Princeton to New York very easily. And I just worked. My experience of being at the atelier is so clouded, so occluded, unfortunately, by the fact that I worked so much.
Yeah.
Like I was the studio manager for a long time for Jacob, which paid for my tuition. I tutored, I don't even know how many hours a week. Basically, I was gone at 7 a.m. and came back at 11 at night every night. And then Saturday and Sunday, I tutored in Princeton or tutored on the Upper East Side. It was the only way for us to live in New York at the time.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky because I never ran out of money, because I always felt like like Harvard and Princeton, like you just say that and then everybody's gonna be like, yeah, please tutor my kid, I'll pay you $200 an hour.
Sure.
So that's what happened. But it was a very, in some ways it was a sad time, because I felt like I never relaxed enough to, as an artist, you have to relax a little. You're not a corporate lawyer.
Yeah,
You're not an attorney, like writing litigation and stuff like that. You have to relax and enjoy and
there has
and
to be
see
that
art.
I find for myself, I can't speak for everybody, but I need significant moments of mental meandering and just daydreaming.
Mental meandering, you
Yeah.
said it. Absolutely.
So but I think what you're saying is really important, because I can't tell you the number of students I've had either apply to the Masters Academy of Art, or call on the phone, and from all over. I mean, from Egypt to Guatemala to China to Turkey. I'm sure all of these schools have this global audience of students that want to go there.
Right.
I'm sure other bigger schools much more than me, but I have had those calls and emails and questions from all over the world, on top of course, the local pop-ins that hear about you or want to check it out, or maybe they just come to the open drawing sessions and see what's going on. I have had hundreds of conversations with students or potential artists where the conversation is the same almost every time. I want to know what their goals are. They tell me their goals. We try to figure out what the best path forward for them is. But the thing that most people do not understand and do not expect is how absolutely dedicated you have to be, and how you cannot allow anything else to distract. So even when you have to work like crazy, even if your commute sucks, even if you have to sacrifice and live super low for a while, if you don't get to the point where you shift your life around enough to focus on this, it's just too hard to really pull off. It's the study, the development of the skill in the first place, but then on top of that, learning how to be this sort of entrepreneurial, self-made artist after your studies. And so I remember for years, I'd have a lot of people that would apply to the GCA that I knew or whatever, and they would have these interviews and they'd come back and be like, yeah, Jacob just tried to talk me out of it for a while, and I thought he was playing this really clever reverse psychology game, and that's how he made everybody want to come, is by telling them they didn't want to do it. And then, our anarchy spirit sets in and we're like, I'll show you. But really, I think now in the last few years, I'm like, I probably should have done more of that. Not in terms of weeding people out, but in terms of just saying, do you really, really want to do this? Yeah. Because in every way, it's difficult. And it shouldn't scare people away. Because if the way I look at it is, if you want to do it, don't do it. If you have to do it, you have to do it. Yeah. If you have to do it, then figure it out, find a way, because the difficulty is all accepted. I because it's so in me, I'm willing to do what it takes, no matter how hard it is. And that's what you were doing, and that's why you're here. That's why you're still here doing amazing work.
Clutching on, and I think it's, the art world is a war of attrition. It's like so many people bow out at 35, at 40, it's like you can see it happening away, people fading away. And like you have to have a tenacity, and that tenacity has to be there kind of from day one. Yeah. So I ended up leaving after 3 years, probably because I felt like I had left the oughts and the musts and the should of my parents behind, and somehow as I was cultivating my studio practice away from the atelier, like I had set up this like little studio in my apartment, and making artwork, I felt like the voice that was inside of myself was a lot like it was Jacob's voice. He was my only teacher. Like some people, they have many teachers over the course of their lifetimes. Like Jacob was my one teacher, and I didn't want anyone's voice in my head except for mine. So I basically, on a Wednesday, I told him I was leaving on a Friday, and I left that Friday, and I had just won the Green Shields Foundation's grant, and that like really helped me the first couple of years get on my feet.
That was maybe 2006?
It was 2008.
Oh, we graduated or left the same year.
Was 2005 to 2008, and I had and the recession had just hit. I think we talked about this. I mean, it was perfect timing, and I remember, I think my Green Shields grant was $13,000, but if the check had exchanged 2 days before, it would have been $20,000. Oh. Yeah, it was really tough. It was tough, but it was like it didn't even matter. It was that somebody believed in me. It felt like somebody beyond the 15 people in the atelier, like someone had popped up and said, well, we believe in you, and
Yeah.
here's some money. We're putting our money where our mouth is. And that meant a lot, even though, it was obviously like not a great time to exchange that Canadian dollar. But yeah, and then I think it took me a long time. Like I spent the first couple of years after the atelier, I started showing pretty quickly in New York. They don't exist anymore, but the Eleanor Ettinger Gallery, I worked with them for
they were
years.
Great.
Yeah, and then it's been a in my mid 30s, things kind of dipped, and I stopped painting for like a year or so because I had moved to Baltimore, and I was painting a little bit, but I wasn't doing a great job because I was having a hard time in my personal life. And I started teaching at MICA, at the Maryland Institute College of Arts, which is a very well-regarded mainstream school. I was teaching painting there, and it was just my lifeline during that time because it was also a very sad time for me personally. So, and then
Did they how were they accepting, the faculty and the students, of something that was
such a good question,
probably a little bit more academic,
good question,
coming from your experience?
They weirdly loved it. I was the weirdo in the faculty.
You were the avant-garde.
I was almost like such a weird commodity that they didn't know what to do with me. But then I'd been teaching all my life. Like I had been tutoring and teaching all my life, and then I was teaching art now, and a lot of my philosophy and pedagogy and the way I pivot around students was the same. And I was able to be like an incredible professor, and I'm really proud of the work that I did at MICA during that time, during the 2 or 3 years that I was there. And in the end, I think there was there was a faculty search, and they asked me to apply. And I remember then that at the interview that they see me only as like an atelier painter.
Yeah, so you didn't have the degrees.
Yeah.
And that is such a silly, important thing. I didn't go
to yeah.
Do you feel like your background in philosophy, I guess, sorry, I have two questions that are maybe play off of each other. One, while you're studying at the atelier, as well as thereafter, how did your philosophy background come into that and influence it? And two, you were in Water Street initially, but GCA kind of started 2006 or 2007, somewhere around there. So you kind of transitioned and had a little bit of both. GCA seems like it started to evolve from a more free-form, almost community effort to a more structured academy that says year 1, year 2, year 3. But you still had the initial influence being a little bit more freedom and community influence. Although obviously Jacob was at the center of it, he was the main teacher, he was the main one giving feedback.
Yeah.
Water Street tended to be a little bit more of a almost like an artist commune where there was a lot of back and forth.
The big difference between Water Street at the time and GCA was we got to see Jacob paint.
Yeah.
That was Jacob's studio.
Right.
We were entirely...
And that was in the basement
the first floor of his Upper East Side townhouse, and then he had the whole floor through, and then the back was his private studio. But he oftentimes painted with us. Yeah. And I think we didn't have any instruction, really, not any formal instruction, unless Jacob felt like doing a critique once in a while. And it all worked fine. It all worked out great. Like,
you had enough. I think they'd been going enough years where there was enough on the walls. There was enough to aim at or example.
Well, and also like the fourth year students were always helping the first and second year students, and you always you painted with them from day one.
Yeah, so you could watch their decision making,
Absolutely,
kind of feed off of that
absolutely,
understanding.
And I think that's why a lot of the Grand Central Atelier students would come in sometimes and have a talk with Jacob in the back, and the reason they wanted to have a conversation was they were like they wanted to come to Water Street.
Yeah.
And I think in the end it forced Jacob's hand. I mean, this is how I see it. I don't know if it's really true, but like I think it forced his hand that he had to do something either like he couldn't be having two things that were like pretty comparable side by side. So he closed the atelier up at his house and then moved out to the Midtown location, which I did some work for at the time. I think I was probably like the first like Justine 1.0 at some point for a few months. I did that as like a part-time job, and then Justine came on then, and now she's still there and doing a great job. And but it was an interesting time. There was a lot of like it was the GCA, the Grand Central Academy, and then some of the founders left, and then it became Grand Central Atelier, and it became, as you said, much more regimented in terms of like the way everything was going to, first years graduate to second year to third year to fourth year. But I mean, at the time that I was at at Water Street, it was a very special time too. Like, I don't mean to make it sound like all I was doing was running around the city trying to tutor. Like, I did really enjoy my time there a lot. It was a very specific culture. It was very male.
Yeah.
I think, it was like Kristen Kuntz, Colleen Berry, and me. I think were like the women at the time. I don't remember other women. So it was a very different time. But I think to your point about the philosophy, I think for me, I don't think just this training of being a philosopher, like being a philosophy student, the training was to just be a very curious person and to see like the logic and how there's a logic in how the Atelier program works, you know, and like what, there's also these like philosophical underpinnings to why, to rationalism and humanism, secular humanism, and
understanding the commonalities when you create a school. I think that's one thing I've studied a lot or tried to pay a lot of attention to. You're running a school, you have so many different personalities. You kind of have to create this system that works for everyone and kind of the average student. And there's a science behind it, right? I mean, I always point to the book called Peak, this Secrets to the New Science of Expertise, where it just breaks down human development towards expertise in any field. And the column, you have probably heard about the 10,000 hour rule. I think it's these scientists are the originators of that. I think Malcolm Gladwell probably popularized it. But they came out with this book to dive a little deeper because in the arts, I don't know if you've heard this a lot. I've heard it a ton. You go to that quote by Degas where he says, "Draw, draw, draw," or if I just keep drawing, I'll get better at drawing. If I just keep pounding my head against the canvas, I'll get better. Which to some degree is true. There's something to be said about experiential knowledge, but there's also something to be said about becoming really efficient at making the same mistakes. The reality that it's very difficult to become aware of what you're unaware of, and when somebody's not pointing it out to you. So I think that may have been the impetus for these guys writing this book to say there's more to it than just practice.
Right.
And the second column, they were saying the first column that human development rests on is 10,000 hours is the general number that it takes to get it to be an expert at anything. The second foundational column is that the 10,000 hours be spent on deliberate practice, which is an organized, progressional, focused practice. And the third column is that practice be watched over and corrected by somebody who's already mastered that skill. And that goes to, like, William Bouguereau's official title in the Academy was head corrector.
Oh,
and
interesting.
I love that.
I love that too.
Because, and that's what the ateliers really offer is the time, the organized progression, and the daily feedback.
Yeah.
And it works. Yeah. It just, in Utah, there's kind of a culture of people who haven't gone to the academies, who haven't, in many cases, even visited the academies, but are incredibly critical of the academies because they see, the constant criticism is very robotic. Everybody looks the same, and that criticism is valid. But what they're not seeing is how efficiently people are learning to see, how efficiently people are learning to develop these skills, and then the breadth of work that you can create with that foundation is endless.
Right.
You're really kind of setting yourself off on a foundation, and the average student, it doesn't matter where they go, they're going to come out as a sort of variation on the dogma. And so you don't, most people are going to come out as copyists anyway. It's a human trait. It's the commonality among, doesn't have a generation. It's endless. This is the way people are. It's only the rare person that's going to be the standout that does something unique or has something to say. So it's a bit of an unfair criticism. And what they're missing, what they're accepting is lesser skill and lesser discipline, I think, in a lot of cases by just allowing themselves to criticize the potentially robotic nature of the academies.
Well, it's also that the academies and the ateliers, that it's the education. If you look at the work that's coming out and then judge it by saying that this is supposed to be like finished artwork, to me, I don't know if you can always do that. Like, it's what comes after that, like what you're using. It's like you're learning how to make sentences and learning vocabulary, and like how are you now you come out and you're going to finally write a book, then write the book and see what that is all about. And I think I think it's a valid criticism, but it's also, I think it's missing the point a little bit.
Yeah, I've always felt that was an unfair way to look at it, that students study and artists create is the way I've always thought about it. And so to criticize a student's study is like looking at a class full of calculus students where they're taught how to solve problems, and then you check all of their answers and the long form written out things, and you see this guy did it the same as her and same as her, same as. Do you know what I'm saying? And you're like, well, that wasn't creative.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be creative at the moment.
Right, I'm trying to get the answer right.
To the point where I have the tools to give voice to my creativity.
I think that's an amazing analogy. I think the answer or the response that I have about that is that, like, with art, does the pedagogy at the ateliers and the academies stamp out some kind of thing that is necessary for the second phase of the artistic career? Is it what I'm saying is the creativity part? Does it make you so scared to be wrong that you don't experiment and go after the bigger thing later? And I think maybe that's true too.
Yeah, I think so. And I've had this conversation. I'm a little hesitant to dive into it again because I feel like I've recorded a lot of podcasts in the last, how long have I been here? A week or so.
Got it. And this is like a theme.
Yeah, but at the same time now I'm talking to you, and I want to talk about it again because it's important. and I think we all recognize
feel
it.
it, yes.
Especially because you and I have the benefit of retrospect now.
Yeah.
We've been in the art game a little while. We've
Yeah.
had some various experience with different institutions, several students, and we are in the art world, so we can see how the ateliers were, how they've evolved, how they exist at the moment, what are the positives and negatives of how they're presenting information to students, and what are the long-term effects. That's, for me, one of the big eye-openers is now I can say, what are the long-term effects of these dogmas?
Right.
And I do think specifically that one of the long-term effects that I see is that the academic system, because it does not include any conversation about art making, picture making, narrative, composition, I mean, that conversation is void in the curriculum, in the environment, in the daily vernacular of the students. All of the praise is heaped on the best academic nude, the most highly rendered cast.
Right.
And so I think there's a legitimate handicap being put on students, which is the replacement of the focus on art with a highly rendered study. And I mean, everybody wants to be praised. Everybody wants to feel like they're accepted by their peers, and they're doing things that are impressive, and they're doing things that impressed them, when they were just starting out.
Right.
And so, I've seen so many people, just continuing the shadow box still lifes, the single head portraits, continuing to do more highly refined student things year after year after year after year after graduation. And, I want to be careful about that criticism, because to each his own. Artistically, you want to, like, what I want Michael Klein to paint, or what I want to see Cesar Santos paint, or I don't get to decide that, right? I get to just sit back and be a fan. And you like it or don't like it, it doesn't really matter. But my opinion on what other people should paint should have no bearing on what they choose to paint. So if someone's heart is absolutely just in still life after still life after still life, great. There's brilliant painters, like Paul Raymond Seaton, and Michael Klein's florals are unbelievable. Obviously Fontaine-Latour and Chardin. So I do want to be somewhat careful about the criticism, but I also think that it's valid to look at the systems and say there is a significant problem in that there should be more obvious individuality. There should be a larger body of creative things coming out that look a little different, that have different interpretive qualities. I was able to talk to Peter Drake at the New York Academy of Art, and maybe you see a little bit of the opposite there, right? Maybe there's a little bit more distinct individuality, but maybe a little less refined skill. And so finding that balance is not an easy thing. I've been trying to think through that for 14 years, and it's all theoretical until you put it into practice with a large student body and see how it plays out. But I do think, I would say my criticism of the academies is that in their current iteration, there is some handicapping elements.
I think it does them a disservice when they go up, when the student graduates and goes out into the universe. Like, what tools did we really show them to, like, knit together that first sentence to the second sentence to the third sentence,
right,
and make a story
right.
arc and get a plot going? Like,
yeah.
And that it's almost like you're supposed to already be fully formed in all those ways, and so it's like the first year to 5 years of being outside of the atelier, you're still sort of a student, because you're trying to figure out, like, 95% of the rest of what you're supposed to be doing, and trying to figure that out, and also breaking through psychological barriers that were established, I think, at the ateliers, because you're so
going back to those expectations.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I think that's just, to me, that's such a disservice. And I think this is totally anecdotal and it based on my own idiosyncratic experience, like idiosyncratic aesthetics. But the people whose work I admire the most out of my like sort of class at Water Street Atelier, and the people who've sort of hung on and done well, they had a breadth of teachers and a breadth of of like experience in the arts prior to coming to Jacob.
Yeah.
And I think a larger exposure, different ideas, different understanding of what's going on. And for me, I didn't have that, but I did have my own aesthetic that I really liked, that I started thinking about when I was back in Houston when I was growing up as a kid. And that has like really served me a lot more. I mean, I don't want to say a lot more. That makes no sense. I was going to say a lot more than the stuff that I learned at Atelier. That's not true. It's like it served me just as much as what I learned at the Atelier.
Yeah.
How to turn form, how to like understand things perspectively, like look at the, what a terminator is on the form and see how the light distribution goes. All those things that are so important and now very highly scientificized, if that's even a word. But in the end, that's not art.
Yeah. It's the toolbox.
It's the toolbox.
Yeah. And I think that, to a large degree, the mentality has been that the toolbox is the end goal. And as if I could just get that, then I've arrived. And I think, this is, again, my argument for the last few years in my own school. 9 years ago, I cut the school from 5 days a week to 4 days a week to encourage people to be working on their own work, and then to bring it in and we would talk about it and we would help them solve more creative
Amazing
problems.
Idea.
I thought so. It didn't really work out because the majority of students are great when they're in school, super disciplined, do amazing, academic nude. The schedule is great. But they don't necessarily go home and do their own work. And I think it's for a couple of reasons that I've seen. I mean, a number of reasons, from not enough confidence to maybe they don't feel like they have any ideas, to maybe because monetary, I don't have money to hire my own models or get a good camera or a computer monitor to work from, or costumes, or the canvas or extra brushes or whatever.
That Friday
there's
vacuum,
so many.
though, that fifth day vacuum is more, to me, more indicative of how they are going to do in the long term.
Absolutely.
Than Monday through Thursday.
Right. Absolutely. Because that starts to involve more of that necessary aspect of entrepreneurship, which is self-motivation and creative thinking. And if you never give yourself a problem to solve, you're never going to find the solutions to those specific problems. So you have to, and the problems that we need to give ourselves as artists is the ideas. I have an idea. How now do I visually depict that idea? I need to start down that road. And my theory is that the development towards conceptually driven picture making or art should be and can be simultaneously developed at the same time as the skill side of things. Yeah. And the only way to do that is a twofold responsibility. One is the system itself. If the system doesn't change and create that expectation among the student body, it's far less likely that the student body as a whole is going to do it. On the other hand, it's the individual responsibility. I was different. I had different motivations. I was married pretty young. I had a family, and I thought, I've got to find a way to use this to pay for my family's life because I'm not getting a job. I'm all in on this, and I will do whatever I have to do to figure this out. So I put that weight on myself, which meant I had to figure it out. So I was painting constantly outside of class and coming up with ideas and trying to being aware of the art world and looking at different artists and looking at different shows and competitions, and it didn't occur to me that wasn't the norm until, again, like I had so many years as a teacher, saw so many students, watched so many students go through other programs as well, and then come out and do their thing. It's just, I think that's the one factor, again, theoretically, that could help evolve the ateliers and the academies to the next level, is if somehow they got it into the student culture that you are just as expected to be bringing in your personal work as you are to be working on a cast. And I've seen it a little bit. I got to the point where I was threatening students that I was going to tear their cast setup down halfway through a project because they just wouldn't bring in their work. I got to a point where I stopped scheduling models and said, we're not doing this anymore. Bring in your own work. Come into my studio. Work on this extra easel I have. Make your painting. Let me help you make your painting. And I had to beg and plead daily with people to do it. And once they did, it was a revelation. Do you know what I'm saying? It was like now that's all they want to do. Now, I mean, it got to the point where I had some of my most serious students quit, which is perfect, because you shouldn't want to assume
they
that
should want to quit.
This is the thing that the academic study is what you want to be doing. It might be the door you have to go through to get where you want to go, but your focus should always, always, always be where you want to go.
Right.
And again, I think that the academies to a large degree have flipped that. The expectation is I want to be a good student, which means I have to be in class all the time. And I think the good students are the ones that skip to go play in their painting. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I love talking to you about this stuff because it just reminded me a lot about when I was at Water Street and how we were always going to openings on Thursdays. We were always going to the Mad or the Frick or the Dahesh. Sometimes we'd go.
I love the Dahesh.
Dahesh, that's so beautiful.
I wish they'd come back.
And I think people were always doing their own still lives. We were always, a bunch of us, sold our work down in Soho at art student showcase with a fellow named Paul who was wonderful. And you do a little still life. You sell it for $300. You get like $100 or something, $150, and that was like big money back then. You were a student. It was, and you could say that like I sold something to somebody who came in and looked at my painting. It's amazing.
It made you feel professional.
It made you feel professional, and then you could go buy some linen and do the next one. It was amazing. It was a special time. I think there were a couple of students, not everybody at the time. We were, some people would read books and like talk about what we were reading, and those kinds of idea exchange was really phenomenal back then. But thank you for reminding me of that. It was a special time to be there. It was a special time.
Well, I think you came, your timing with, Water Street, GCA, and then what came after that. I think it's interesting because it never felt like you had that handicap. It didn't, probably from your experience of breaking out of familial expectations, maybe like really unshackled you in terms of feeling more free, because now your work is so expressive, so deliberate. It has an incredibly unique to you quality that includes abstraction, almost a sort of fantastical feel. I'm just looking at this one here. It feels sort of like a Malay painting that's in the BYU Museum, with the drapery and the expressiveness, and the kind of what I saw in maybe Travis's work, Kate's work, Sebastian Jupil, which Shane Wolfe, all those guys in Paris that just smacked me in the face, which was, I just kept coming back to the word fearless. There was they just had a deep, purposeful, distinct reason for doing what they were doing. And also a freedom not to feel like they were going to mess up, or they couldn't do something a little bit more abstracted or suggestive. I love what Travis said. He said, "I just work on it until I don't think I can make it better, and then I just don't touch it anymore." And
I like that.
And
too.
So it wasn't just like, I have to render the form like this, and it's supposed to look like this, but I'm going to work on it. I'm going to react to it. I'm going to be open to the beauty that emerges, and then I'm going to let that be. And talk about going in with zero preconceptions, right? You're just allowing all of your developed ability, that I would say is probably conscious initially and becomes subconscious, kind of second nature. You don't necessarily think about mixing color anymore, or you can get proportion right, and those things kind of become second nature. You allow that kind of developed intuition to take over, along with your developed aesthetic sensibilities, and that's where the painting leads you, and the painting leads you.
To me, when I look at Travis's work and also Kate's, it's easy to clump them together, obviously, because they're partners. But I feel like when I see that, it's very much that they are attuned to a muse or whatever the universe is going to provide, and then it sieves through them, and that sieve is so fine. It's like the fineness of the education, the aesthetic sensibility, everything that you just said, and then whatever comes out, is on the canvas is what it is. But everything, it's almost like when you think of the word inspire, it comes from, to breathe through, and it's like everything is just being breathed through them and into the work. And so if you think that that's the case, then you cannot be afraid. Because fear actually stops up the sieve, the filtering, and also like clumps everything up. And
because you get kind of tight.
You get tight, and then
nervous.
You can't, and then the idea is gone anyways, because the idea wants you to be free and open, and like you said, like willing and able to receive, to be a receptacle. It's almost that you have to be as like in a way passive to receive all of that. But I do find their work to be absolutely confident, and like they're smelling something and just following the aroma of it to the logical and final conclusion.
I really see that in your work as well. There's an artistic sophistication, a maturity that I kind of look at where I'm at mentally, just as a person at this point, and a lot of the self-doubt or even maybe overconfidence or born of ignorance that I have shed through life experience gives me a certain calm about things that, in my opinion, I see in your work. There's just a calm and an assurity and a confidence born of that self-assurity that you just say what you want to say, how you want to say it, and it's just so unique and refreshing and artistically, for me, intriguing, and just it demands my attention. It just pulls me in, and I'm just in love with the visuals of it, and to me there's just such a, I don't necessarily always understand the motivation, but I understand the deliberate nature of the motivation. Nothing feels haphazard. Nothing feels lazy. Nothing feels forced or insincere. It feels like, when I look at it, I think everything on here has a purpose, and I aspire to it. Do you know what I'm saying?
That is so nice, Ryan. Thank you. I have torched my life so many times. Like, I just don't have that worry in the studio, like, in anymore. Like, I have, left school early multiple times, went to school just to find what I needed to do, and then bought back out. And then, kind of philosophically left my parents behind, philosophically left all these people behind. I've gotten divorced, all of these things. Like, I just try not to bring that fear with me into the studio.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I don't owe anyone anything. Like, and this is just a grander philosophical thought. Like, I feel like, I think we started this conversation off just saying, like, the best art project you have is life, and like every single day is like everything that you do is your choice. And that's the same thing with my artwork. Like, everything I'm doing, it's a choice. So why would I choose to answer to somebody else?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I struggle with that. To be brutally honest with myself, it's one of those things that I'm trying to figure out, that I think is kind of holding me back to a degree. Is I tend to compare myself quite often. I tend to.
If you don't feel like you have a family, you don't compare as much. Like, I don't feel, not that I was like sprung out of this without like relationships and like in an art historical context, but in some ways I do feel very much alone. Like, I sell my paintings mostly, like, I haven't worked with a gallery consistently in like 2 years, and I sell most of my artwork through like word of mouth or through collectors or friends that I have. And I just feel like I am doing this on my own, and I know, like, if you feel that way, you can never scale it up into an empire. But I'm very, like, at this point in my life, very happy with where I am. But I feel like I don't compare as much as I used to, because I feel like already like quite alone. Yeah. And that's the thing that I don't like. Like, I want my work to be in conversation with other people's work. And so that's probably something that I have to work on too. Like, feeling more that, like, that I need to go out there and have my artwork be in dialogue with other people's artwork. And I think I do that a little less, and COVID has made that even worse, like, that I want to cocoon more inside of myself. But I think that's the flip side of it, is that, like, you feel beholden to other people, or comparing with other people, because you have like an art family. I don't feel that way all the time.
Yeah, well, it's also, I think a lot of my anxiety comes from feeling like I'm the breadwinner, feeling like I'm going to spend all this time in the studio. I'm already incredibly selfish in terms of, like, I chose this crazy thing to do, and following this passion that's been really difficult. And, when I paint things and spend a long time on them, spend a bunch of money on framing, spend a bunch of money shipping them, spend a bunch of money, maybe entering a competition, and then, it gets no recognition, or maybe it doesn't get in, or maybe it doesn't sell. And, my studio is full of expensive frames and stacks of paintings. And
what do you think are behind you in that box?
Right. But to me, I think part of my anxiety is that constant feeling of, if it's not selling and it's not getting that recognition, I don't know if I can feel like a responsible adult or father or husband. Like, how do I come home? At that point, it feels maybe like a kind of expensive hobby. And am I being too selfish here? How much longer do I let this go on? And that has been kind of my mentality from the very beginning, because I did set that standard for myself where I was never going to have a backup plan, and I was going to force this to work.
Yeah.
And so the recognition isn't, for me, like wanting to be the center of attention or wanting to be, rich and famous artist. It's like I just want to feel like my decisions are responsible and I can give my family what I was hoping to.
Thank you for sharing that. That makes a lot of sense. And I loved that you never had a plan B, Yeah,
well, it didn't come from, but I remember hearing, I think it might have been an Oprah quote or something, but it was something like, if you give yourself a second option, you'll usually take it because it's easier. And I really just thought, I've come this far, I've dedicated this much. This is not going to be a part-time thing. I'm not going to do it if it's part-time. I'd start to rely on the guaranteed check. And I'd start to think I'd put energy into that job. How can I do this better?
Totally.
How can I move up?
Absolutely.
And then you have kids that start to rely on that, and then I'd just never do it. Yeah. So I knew that, and I never. But at the same time, I recently talked to Howard Ray's Gallery in New York, and he said he gives it the advice to his kids not to quit their day job. Or his kids, I'm sorry, his artists, because if you have to rely on the sale of your work, it could change what you paint. It could change, and certainly with me, a lot of the things that I've painted have been those pot boiler, maybe landscapes that are just pure aesthetics, end up feeling very, just decorative. They'd go well with an interior design firm or something. And maybe put to the side some of my more complex, passion-driven things that are going to take 6 to 8 months to make. So there has been a lot of moments like that. But even my pot boiler moments, even my decorative painting moments, are not pushing carts at Shopko, So I feel very lucky that I've been able to do it, but I do have the ongoing anxiety of balancing, trying to be as true to myself as I can, being willing to be experimental, and then being responsible. Right. So I think it's something that every artist has their own anxieties, and every artist has their own demons that they fight, and things that haunt them, and decisions that will always haunt them, and insecurities. What we do is for public consumption. So if the public spits it out, it's like, oh, I thought that was such a yummy taste, but nobody seems to like it. So do I change it? Do I keep going? I'll find an audience. I mean, there's just limitless self-doubt and self-incrimination and really looking at yourself and self-analyzation and trying to maybe refocus and be more disciplined. And I mean, I feel from day to day often just like a complete schizophrenic with my thoughts, and I'll be up one day and down another day, and it's just an ongoing insane struggle. I'm making that sound very negative. I mean, it's all part of it. It's sure. There's a lot of positivity to that as well, and the joy for me is I kind of thrive on the chaos, and I love to get up in the morning and just not really knowing what I'm going to paint on. I've got 30 options in the studio, and what feels right to me? What do I want to paint on? Where am I going to find my joy today? Right. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I don't want to make that sound negative or defeatist or I don't want to be discouraging, but that's just part of my reality. And thank God, because if I had a desk job and didn't get this craziness, it would be soul crushing.
Yeah.
So I think probably every artist is going to go through some form of that in their own way.
Yeah, I agree. I think also just sort of what you laid out in terms of like responsibility and all that, like all of those factors, we have them in varying degrees, different configurations. But I mean, your story makes a lot of sense to me, and I definitely get it from that that at least theoretical point of view. Like,
so what sorry, I have the problem. I'm not a professional podcaster, as you've noticed, as everyone has noticed. So I tend to ramble on a little bit too much.
No, it's been great.
I want to put the focus back on you.
Sure.
What's next? I mean, I love what you're doing. It seems like you're kind of branching out. I see like a portrait over here that's just gorgeously rendered.
Oh,
there's a portrait up here of Michael Gormley, who I know.
Yep.
He used to be, was he the last editor of American Artist magazine before it
Correct.
went under?
Yes,
and then still involved with the art scene quite a bit.
He's the executive director of the Artists Equity Association,
That's right.
which I'm the treasurer of the board for right now. So
I was a part of, was it a portrait show last year?
Oh my gosh, yes. I was on that with Beverly McNeil and Patty Watwood.
Okay.
That was 2 years ago, I think.
Okay.
I helped jury that. I think you had a great portrait in that.
Yeah, I can't even remember what it was.
I don't even remember what it was, but I remember being like, I think that's Ryan. I can always tell your work. And then I was like, I think that's Ryan's work. And then it was, and I was like so jazzed that you had it sent over.
Yeah. I mean, showing in New York is great. I'd love to do more of it. I have so many friends here. I don't get to come out, especially with COVID, as often as I want. But any excuse to participate and be in this scene and is something I love doing. But I mean, where can people find you? You've got a website.
Yeah, I have a website, which I'm going to redirect soon, but it's www.hmarriage-song.com. marriage-song.com. My last name was Marriage Song for a long time, and I recently got remarried, and I decided to drop the marriage and go back to my original sort of birth name, Hyeseung Song. But it was Marriage Song for a long time. And I'm on Instagram at Hyeseung S.
And spell that, because I think I spelled it wrong. I spelled it H-E-Y, but it's H-Y-E-S-U-N-G.
H-Y-E-S-E-U-N-G.
How did I just get it wrong again? I thought I was so sure.
At Hyeseung S.
H-Y-E-S-E-U-N-G.
And then my handle is with an S at the end.
Okay.
Hyeseung S for Instagram. And right now I'm not, like I said, I'm not really working with too many galleries, although I've had like I think I had a show or was in a group show at JRK Gallery in Utah.
Oh, JKR?
JKR, sorry, JKR Gallery.
Yeah, I think that's J. Kirk Richards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. J. Kirk Richards. That was like earlier, or sorry, now it's 2022, but it was in 2021. And then in terms of my studio work, like I'm working on a couple of sort of commissioned works, and I have been doing a lot of sort of thinking about going three-dimensional. I really was brought to figure painting through figure sculpture. So I'm thinking to do a larger body of work that somehow incorporates figure sculpture.
Cool.
A few years ago, I went to Penland, which is a school of arts and crafts down in Asheville, North Carolina, and I was able to do a lot of monotypes. So I really would love to get back to printing, but again, I think printing has been hard because you have to go to a printing place, and it's been hard for COVID. But so I'm excited to embark on a new body of work starting the springtime. February is when I'm supposed to be. I guess it's February almost already, and then I am launching a collection of NFTs, so I'm excited about that.
That's a whole nother thing. we could go down that
we could go down that NFT rabbit hole. Yeah, I'm working on that right now. And
so all the digital technological stuff with that?
I don't know that much about it right now. I'm basically just fashioning the NFTs, but they're just, I have a friend from college who has launched several NFT collections and is really I hope will help shepherd me through the process, and we're planning to partner up a little bit about doing this. But I'm really excited about that, and I think it's a good time to get involved with it. It seems like everything that I've read, it just seems like a really good time, and it's starting to get more buzz, and Reese Witherspoon and a few other celebrities are starting to buy figurative NFTs, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then I think the largest thing that's been the kind of the biggest thing that's happened last year and going into this year is that I over the course of several years I wrote a memoir called Worth, and it was sold to Simon & Schuster, and it's coming out probably at the end of this year, maybe next year.
Wow.
And so I'm working on that. So I've been writing a lot too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is it illustrated?
It is not illustrated, but all my artist friends ask that. They're like, "Are you going to illustrate the cover? Are you going to illustrate the? You're going to put pictures of your work in the pages?" That's something to talk to my editor. I think generally that is not something that is done because it's extremely expensive.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons why I'm learning about the whole business of publishing a book, and one of the reasons why most books are about the same amount of pages is because it's expensive to do much more than that.
Sure.
And then also covers are usually done with the marketing and publicity people, not really with a lot of say from the author, and then any color prints or even black and white prints inside the books, images, that's really expensive too. So that's something to talk to the editor about, but that would be really cool.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
That's exciting. I love hearing when artists are kind of dipping into various mediums. I just talked to Peter Trippi about maybe doing a little writing. I've done a little bit of writing.
I think you would be great.
Just at my own blog.
Yeah, I think you would be great.
Just kind of jotting ideas down. I've got pages and pages and pages in my sketchbooks of just thoughts, and
I'm sure.
Especially going through school and whatever. So it's something I really enjoy. I've started a little bit of sculpture as well.
Yeah.
I've done a little bit of printmaking. I mean, now I'm trying to do put a TV show together to pitch to Netflix, which is what I was doing in Paris. But it's the world of creativity that motivates me, and being able to explore different avenues like you're talking about is really cool to hear. So I'll have to get a signed copy.
Yes, absolutely.
When it comes out.
And done. No
Sweet.
problem. Yeah.
I'm excited to see that, and thank you so much for
thank you. This was
bringing
amazing.
us in the studio.
Learning more about you too. It was great.
Yeah. Well, thank you, and we'll wrap it up there.
Okay. Thanks.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Sweet. Oh, I think Patty told me about that memoir. She's excited about it too.
Oh yeah, that's great. You are so thoughtful in your responses and how you're leading the conversation. Thank you so